All right, today we are going to learn about rate of change. So the things that you need are your math notebook, a piece of paper, and a pencil. So let's get started. We're going to first review what is slope. So if you can recall, slope is rise over run. If you can remember, rise means up and down, and run means left to right. You are good to go. So we're going to be getting more into detail with about rise over run. So a question you can ask yourself, can we find the slope from 2 points? Yes, absolutely. If we only have points and we can't draw it out, it's not feasible to draw it out on a graph, or it's a little bit more time consuming, we can easily use a formula in order to find the slope from 2 points. So first we need to label them. So this is an x, right? So of the set of 2, this is my first x. So we're going to put a little 1 kind of underneath the x. So this is my first x. So then that means that the second x is going to be what? The second one. So it's going to have a 2 underneath it. Well, off to the side. So then, same thing with the y's. This is my first set of y's, and this is my second set of y's. So in about 30 seconds, it'll make complete sense of why this is what it is. So remember, when you're looking at your first point, this is my first set of points. And then this is my second set. Okay, pretty easy to remember. Remember x1, y1, x2, y2. So our slope formula, or the rate of change, is going to look like this. So it says the change in y over the change in x. So that means the change from one y to the next over the change in an x to another x. So what that's going to look like based on what we had before, remember we had x1, comma y1, x2, comma y2. Remember we looked at those in the last slide? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the change in y. So, y2. We're going to subtract y2 from y1. The reason why is because we need to figure out the difference, the change from from the first y to the second y. Right? So if I say that I started at my house at 7 a.m. and I got to school at 9 p.m., you'd have to figure out how long did it take me to get there. Well, it took me 2 hours to get to school for some weird reason. So that's why it says change in y. Then you have to do the same thing, change in x. So x2 minus x1. So we're going to be using this formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 throughout our process. One way that you can remember it is u, which starts with the letter y, r over, which would be division, your x. So y over x, right? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's go try and do some practice problems, and I'll show you the steps on how to do it. So the first step that you need to do is label our points. We need to label them x1, x2, y2, y1. Okay? So remember, this is my first set. So this is going to be x1 and y1, because remember x and y. Then the 9 is going to be my x2, and the 5 is going to be my y2. So do you remember the formula? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 5 and subtract it from this 3. Then underneath it, what we're going to have is our x2, which is 9, minus our x1. So now we labeled our points. The second step will be to write out the equation and plug the numbers in. So we wrote out the equation, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and we subtracted 5 from 3 on the top, and underneath we subtracted 9 from 2 on the bottom. So I want you to solve what the top and bottom would be and see if you get the same answer. So go ahead and pause the video. So 5 minus 3 is 2, and 9 minus 2 is 7. So I have to simplify, meaning making it as small as possible, making sure that no other number can go into it. So obviously 2 can't go into 7 and vice versa. So our slope for this line and these 2 points is 2 over 7. Okay, let's try the next one. All right, so we have both of these 2 problems here. So let's label them. I have x1, y1, x2, and y2. Just remember, the first point always is x1 and y1. Second point is always x2, y2. If you flip them around, that's totally fine, as long as you don't mix the x's and the y's on the top and bottom. So I have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So again, I'm going to take my 8 and subtract it from my 4. Then underneath, what's going to be under it? 6 minus 0. Okay. So what's 8 minus 4? That's going to be 4. Oops, sorry. It's an ugly little 4. And 6 minus 0 is what? Just 6, right? So this is where it comes in handy. Can I simplify this? 4 over 6? Absolutely. The highest number that they both can go into is 2. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 2. So my new slope is 2 over 3. Moving to the next one, let's label it again. x1, y1, x2, y2. So I have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I want you to pause this video and figure out what my answer, my final slope answer, is going to be. Now that you've paused it, let's see if you got the right answer. So I have 3, a minus, an 11 on the top. And on the bottom, I have a negative 6 and a 10. So if I have $3 in the bank account and I try to take out 11, how much money am I going to owe the bank? Negative $7. Or sorry, $8. Then on the bottom, negative 6 and a negative 10, or minus 10, is going to give me negative 16. Ooh, so I have 2 negatives. What's a negative divided by a negative? A positive. So I can instantly have 8 over 16. Now the real question is, can I reduce this? Absolutely. The highest number they both go into is 8, so I'm left with 1 over what? 2, 1/2. And there's my slope. Let's try the last two problems, and then you will be ready to start your focus, or not your focus area, sorry, your checkpoint. So, label them again. x1, y1, x2, y2. What's the formula? y2 over my 1 over x2 minus x1. So now I'm going to take my y2 and subtract it from my y1. Since this is a -3 and for my y1, put it in parentheses. It'll be a lot easier to understand once we start subtracting. So on the bottom I have 7 minus a 7. So what we have here is we have 5 minus a -3. Do you guys remember when I have a negative and a subtraction sign next to each other? What does it make? Two negatives make a giant positive. So what's 5 plus 3? 8. And 7 minus 7 is going to be a 0. So anytime we have 0 on the bottom, it's going to be undefined. Okay? If you try to plug it into a calculator, you will get an error message, which means that it's undefined. If we got 0, then that means it would be 0. So let's do the next one. x1, y1, x2, y2. We have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to take this -14 and subtract it from a 14. Then on the bottom I have -2 and a 5. -2 minus a 5. Remember that the minus is in between them, in between the x's and the y's. You need to make sure you have it, because that's what the formula says. And we want to make sure we're doing the formula correctly. So I have -14 minus 14. Remember, they're both negative. Remember the keep, change rule? Keep the first number the same, change the sign, and then change the positive to a negative. So I'm basically adding -14 and -14, which is going to give me what? -28, yes. Same thing with the bottom. Keep, change. -2 plus a -5 is going to give me what? -7. Now the real question is, can this be reduced? Absolutely. But first, two negatives equal a positive. So, if I'm dividing two negatives, the answer is going to become positive. What is 28 divided by 7? 4. So my slope is 4. Sometimes you'll get a whole number, sometimes you'll get a fraction. But now you are ready to log into your summit and do slope from 2 points.